Hi, my name's Don Robinson. I was really the starter or founder of Radio 270. In those days, I'd be 29, 30 years old. It was an adventure. I learned a lot from it. And as a result of things like that, we got commercial radio into Britain, and a lot of things happened. It was a growing up era for me, as a young kid, and I got some other people in Scarborough, Wolf Proudfoot, who was a member of Parliament, and things like that, and Leonard Dale, who was a fantastic guy, Leonard Dale, who had Leonard Dale, the electrical works or factory at Scarborough, who sent things all over the world, and particularly a man called Bill Pashby, who had been in the wartime, but he also was a fisherman in Scarborough with his own fishing boat and so forth. A lot of fish was caught in Scarborough in those days, and at the harbour he got this big fishing boat, and when he got people like that involved, but Bill Pashby did a tremendous amount of things for it, would have been a seaman and so forth. But there were incredible days. Peter Duncan and I forget people now, and people watching it. What do they call it? There's an MP now, Robert. What's his name?
Roger Gale.
Roger Gale, who's an MP now, who's just got a knighthood. It's incredible. I sent him a note to the House of Commons, to congratulate him, and he sent me a marvellous letter back saying that were marvellous days, Radio 270 days were. And I learnt a lot from it because I was a little upstart. And I think a lot of young people who are starting in business now, start in business, get involved in business. That's how you learn. Since then we've travelled around the world building leisure companies. We've been in America, South Africa, all over the place. And I went to Bulgaria about 18, 20 years ago, and we've operated there with things in Bulgaria. Bulgaria, and can I just say for Bulgaria is of the countries that changed over, Bulgaria is the most progressive. It's not a big population, but what they did, the old system, was to give the young children, good education, and that education is paying off now. Bulgaria is booming. It's the place to be looking at for business if you're interested in that.
So can I say bon après-midi, goedemiddag, and good afternoon. It was my pleasure 10 years ago to write the book about Radio 270. It rather irritated me that all the London journalists tended to dismiss it fairly swiftly in their histories. So I decided to do it myself 10 years ago, and it's fully sold out, I'm afraid. So I have no extra books to sell.
All 50 copies?
Well, actually, it was 2,000. Would you believe it? There were 2,000 fans bought the book. As the same was with the Radio Caroline North. That's also sold out. The only radio book I have left, and Roger Scott is nicking it at the moment, is The Adventures of Johnny Walker, tracing him from his swinging Radio England days through Caroline and Radio 1, and leaving Radio 1 and going to America, and then coming back doing Radio 2. I've got a few copies of that. Nobody else will be selling it, I can assure you, because nobody's ordered it from here. So €5 if you want a copy, about half a dozen left. Just rush up at the end if you fancy a copy of that.
Form a queue, please, if you would.
Yes, very orderly. So anyway, unfortunately Pete Bowman has rather bad hearing at the moment.
What?
So Pete is at the end. We'd like him to join in, but if he's struggling with his audio, then we quite understand. As you probably know, in the UK, we're in the middle of this scandal involving not only DJs, but also bishops and MPs. Last week it was Ray Terrett, went to see the police, and this week, of course, DLT. And, Magic AM, being very, very loyal to its staff, have fired him for the time being. No evidence whatsoever as yet, no charge as yet, but he's deemed to be not a suitable broadcaster at the moment. Very sad. I think the world's gone insane, but I blame it all on Brussels. Anyway, I hope the police don't know about this event. They'll have a field day with all the disc jockeys hanging around here. And if the ladies, if you're serenaded by an Engelsman with Brenda Lee's coming on strong, then don't be too harsh, because we all live back in the 60s. Listening to the super hit sound of Radio 270.
Yes. Oh, sorry.
So it was you who was doing it. Anyway, we have, to set us up, the sound of Radio 270, and this should be The Breakfast Show from June 1967, featuring The Boy.
Thank you. No, it's all.
I've been a bit sleepy, a few boobs here and there. Hope you don't mind. I doubt if you're wide awake enough to notice anyway. 10 Heath playing my theme means I gotta get out of here. Make room for the news at 9 o'clock and Bob Snyder around about 2 minutes after. Bob Snyder's just fallen out of the door. I'll be back at 3 o'clock this afternoon for 60 minutes of new releases and Rise of Review, followed at 4 o'clock immediately by the 270 Fun 40 show through to 6:30. So have a brilliant day. Sorry about the weather, but you can have a good time anyway. Adults in the pub, and the juniors in the arcades along the front, spending their pennies in all the machines. And that isn't meant figuratively speaking. Until 3 o'clock this afternoon, Mike Hayes saying have a good day. Until then, bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Mr. Mike Hayes, Mikey Mo.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.
And the slogans on 270, 270, it's a rave on the medium wave. Pops aplenty, weren't there?
There certainly were plenty of pops, and especially if you went go, go, go with Mikey Mo.
You sounded terrific there. You still sound good. We joined, by some very talented people here. You know the history of 270. It was built in, the ship was built in Holland in 1939. It was sold to a gullible fishing man for £2,500 in autumn 1965. It was refurbished partly in Holland and partly in Guernsey. It floated up on late March 66 and suffered this immense gale, the worst one in 50 years apparently. So unfortunately the mast had to be removed. So there was no April the 1st transmission from the station. 2.5 months later, having been mended down in Grimsby, where Paul Burnett looked after it all that time. Goodness knows what he was doing with himself, but anyway, he was on the ship all that time. June the 11th, transmission first of all, 1966, very close to Swinging Radio England actually, and the first record, Strangers on the Shore. And just to show the difference in musical styles, they followed that up with record number 2, was Wilson Pickett, 6345789. So a bit of everything on there. 2 weeks later, after the launch, a young man came down from Scotland and joined the station. It was, on the end, Pete Bowman. So I'm hoping Pete might be able to fill us in about the mutiny that took place in November 1966. which Pete was part of, but amazingly, he survived. What happened was the 3 DJs who complained about the conditions and the tender, they all got instantly fired, which made way for Mikey Moe and Roger Scott. Now, as you know, in a later life, Roger Scott became the original man of action on another station. Do you remember that? Yes, of course we do. And our third panellist down here is a man who knew exactly when he started on Radio 270 and exactly when he finished. The very precise John Aston. So if I could ask Pete, if you could possibly tell us about, you started 2 weeks after the first transmission, and Roger Gale, the MP now for Thanet, was the programme controller who you'd previously met while you were doing a disco, I think, in Darlington. But disc, they had them in those days. But comparing Radio Scotland with the facilities on Radio 270, how would you rate the difference?
Well, I think on 270 is much more disciplined, actually. It sounds extraordinary probably to these guys, but it was. Where Radio Scotland, I think as far as the music is concerned, I think you played whatever fell out of the cupboard, you know, the first thing that came out. You just played anything at all. There was no format, there was no anything. Whereas on Radio 270, and when one of the Australians, Noel Miller, took over as programme director, he instituted an Australian format which was very, very rigid. You played everything in exact sequence and exact order. And whether that stayed after he left, I have no idea. But at the time, that's what he instituted, and that's how we went about it.
Well, you may have played them in the right order, but Roger Scott didn't have a clue in what order to play them.
No, I found the format involving a big chart and coloured pencils and numbers and squiggly signs completely incomprehensible. And I think I possibly asked one or two fellow jocks, so how do you work around this then? Because I'd heard of formats, but basically that was, you know, play the record at the front of the box and then put it to the back of the box and on you go. But there was something messianic almost about this format.
That's how you do it.
This format that I think Neddy Noel Miller had dreamed up, probably from station FU, 6FU in Perth, Australia or somewhere like that, although he was a man from Sydney, so it wouldn't have been Perth. So I'll take that back. So what I ended up doing was the Roger Scott format, which was the best imaginable music for 3 hours at a time, which was, in my humble opinion, better than any formatted 1 hour.
Leaving the crap for us.
Leaving the crap for Mike Hayes and Guy Hamilton and the rest.
Yeah. You mentioned Noel Miller, Pete. Should we have a clip of Noel Miller doing a trailer? Clip number 9. For a T-shirt, I think.
Spencer, you always looking so good. Yeah, number 5, Spencer Davis Group, When I Come Home. I'll be wearing a 270 T-shirt. I really will. Everyone is wearing them. They really are. Now then, they're just 12 and 6 for a T-shirt, a blue design and a white shirt. Very impressive. You look very handsome or very lovely, depending on whether you're a male or a female. So there. And they're small, medium or large sizes, and you can get them from 12 and 6 post-paid. Now then, just write your T-shirts. Radio 270, Scarborough, Yorkshire.
Luisteraars in Nederland, zend voor u 270 T-shirt €7,50 aan. Radio 270, Scarborough. En het T-shirt wordt u gefrankeerd toegezonden.
I see. Very well. I tell you, you ever get indigestion? Every now and then. Stop that girl, she's smoking. Put her out. Oh, Chris Andrews, number 23 sound on the 270, top 40. All right, on the boot show, 21 minutes past the hour of 1 o'clock And what is going on? Where the action is. Oh, I see. The action's going around the lunch table at the moment. Oh, dear, all these gannets. Can't get a look in. I'm finished, I really am.
Was that really Noel Miller? No Australian accent there, was there?
I didn't recognise an Australian accent, although it may have been trying to pretend he was English.
Yeah, possibly.
Because he was embarrassed about his Australian accent, because they're all criminals in Australia.
He was a very intense, or probably still is, quite an intense man. Thoroughly likeable, but quite intense. So he would have given a lot of thought to what accent to use, I suspect.
So we've heard from Pete, who joined in June, and then Mike and Roger. John joined even later, after a very venerable career all over the place. Just tell us briefly, John, the stations you were on before you came to 270 in March '67.
Right, it's quite a long list. I started off with King Radio, and that, of course, turned into Radio 390, which to me was a bitter disappointment, because I like pop music, and I wasn't that keen on the 390 format of half an hour of piano music, masters of the organ, and a trip down memory lane. Struck me as a bit restrictive. But it made a fortune for those involved with it, and good luck to them, and they deserved it. The reason I know when I joined 270 and when I left it was the fact I wrote it down. That made life a lot easier. Remembering the bits I didn't write down, of course, is a lot harder. Therefore, I wish I had written them down in the first place. I joined 270... well, in fact, I left, I'm doing a bit of a jump there that I shouldn't be doing. 390, I could have stayed on for a long time, I think, but luckily I didn't, because we'd had bad weather, and boats can do crew changeovers and the like in bad weather, because they're both bobbing up and down, whereas a fort is stationary and the boat crashes into it, and eventually the boat would sink, or vice versa, depending upon which was the larger of the two. Anyway, the fort captain rushed into the studio, Sheldon J. this was, and said, "John, the minute that record finishes, read this Ravalli advertisement. It's 5 days out of date because of bad weather conditions and no ship-to-shore link. The copy couldn't get to us." So I've taken the sheet of paper, and in front of me is a studio window, and there's a microphone cable that comes down in front of the glass. So I've put the script there. Perfect. I set up the next record. The record that was playing finishes. I put the microphone on and go straight into the Ravalli ad, basically to a point whereby, and in this week's issue, you can read all about, and the paper fell down onto the floor. I can't reach it with my feet, I can't reach it with my hands. There's a major problem going on here. So, not knowing what it said, because I'd not read the thing, it was just reading it cold. I said, well, in this week's Ravalli, you can read lots of exciting things. And anyway, as a sacrificial lamb, I was put forward and dismissed, which I then, for my sins, went to Radio Essex. An interesting place.
Were you there with Roger at the time?
Yeah, I was there before.
Oh, right, yeah.
And it was great fun. I helped a little bit of engineering knowledge, and I got one of the toilets working for them. Lots of handy
Very
things.
useful.
Such talent.
Things DJs have to do.
Can I just interrupt you? The piano music just brought back my first program ever was a scripted 15-minute program of piano music. Very exciting. And I had to do that once a week on the Aden Forces Broadcasting Association in Aden. And it still got me, in the end, onto 270, that piano music.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
And we didn't have a piano on 270.
No, and try imitating one, mate.
Yeah, very, very difficult.
If we had one, it would have had to have been in gimbals, wouldn't it? As sort of the world's only gimbaled piano, I suppose. Sparky would have been able to play it, I expect.
That would have been a good name for disc jockey, wouldn't it?
Don't mention Uncle Mac.
Oh, don't mention Uncle
Jim Ball.
Definitely not.
So anyway, John.
Essex.
Proceeding. From Essex.
Yeah, from Essex, I departed there in June '66 or May, it might have been. I'm not quite sure, and joined Caroline North on the 12th of July, and I was there through to the 27th of September, as I was made redundant. Every once in a while in Parliament, an MP would stand up and say, "What are we going to do about the pirate radio stations?" To which all the advertising would vanish instantly. It was quite amazing, the speed with which it ceased to be there. Anyway, they had a staff cutback on the news department, which Graham Webb had employed me for, and I left them on the 27th of September 1966. I then I was going to join Swinging Radio England and Britain Radio. However, they decided not to employ any more people for a while as they were having financial problems. And I was put on to a subsidiary of Pearl and Dean, the cinema advertising agency, called Radio Vision International. And they handled offshore radio advertising programs and things. And I had about 3 weeks selling advertising space locally, which I hated, so left. And that was the end of that. Anyway, Radio Caroline then contacted me in December '66 and said, "Can you come back to us, as we'd like you to go to the South Ship," which I did. Having worked on the North Ship, the Fredericia, I always thought that was a far more stable boat. And the Mi Amigo, I thought, was likely to sink at any moment. I got my timing years out, decades out, but it was true in the end, just as ill-conceived, I think. Anyway, I joined 270 on March the 17th, and that was all good fun. I'd left Caroline because we'd had an incredibly bad storm, and we were up all night, and I thought, no, I'm getting out of this. But,
so you came up to Yorkshire. You got some good stories about the waves as well. We'll come to that in a tick.
I've got a good story about a wave as well.
Oh, a wave.
Yes.
Not my one, surely.
Wave on the wave.
No, I doubt. These were very special waves.
Yeah, go on.
No, it was one of these force 11 easterly storms. And if you've seen a photograph of the Ocean Seven.
They blow in from Holland, don't they?
They do, yes. Yes, there's a certain cheesy smell about them. But anyway, it was when you're in the studio, the gimbals have been mentioned, you all know this, the pickups are on gimbals, so after 3 hours of doing a program, you think the record players are moving and you're sitting still, but of course it's not so. And I'm standing under the whaleback, and the whaleback is the steel cover over the bow of the ship, with the young transmission engineer, and suddenly the whole boat disappeared. We're looking to the back of the ship, and the whole boat and the bridge disappeared under what I believe they call green water. And we were dry because we were under this steel thing, and we were suddenly clinging onto each other like two kids, scared out of our, really petrified. And slowly but surely, the bridge reappeared. And the rest of the boat reappeared. But that was extremely frightening. And one other little anecdote about that day, the crew went to the skipper and said, "Skipper, can we start the engine? Because if the anchor chain breaks, we're doomed. But the skipper, I'm sorry about the skipper, he was scared stiff. He'd locked himself in his cabin on the bridge. This is true. And he's saying, "Get away! This is mutiny! You cannot start the engines!" So they were good sailors and they obeyed their captain. Silly buggers. And the chain broke. The anchor chain broke. And we were very lucky because it broke at the anchor end and not at the ship end, so that we still had 2,000 metres of cable, keeping the ship reasonably on its place off the Flamborough Head.
What sort of period was this? Midwinter?
I imagine it was, quite honestly. I mean, it's silly, I think it was spring or something like that, but it was a horrific experience. And of course, anything that happened after that was all, I don't care, I'm a sailor now. Ooh. And, but that was terrifying.
One of the comments I made in the Radio Caroline North book was all that effort just to play a few records. And it's
how dare you? How dare you?
Yeah, but it was madness, wasn't it?
Yeah, good fun though.
Yeah, certainly good fun. But we'll come on to whether you do it again in a moment. Pete, at the end, you joined at the end of June, but by November there was a bit of a mutiny with 3 DJs and yourself, so 4 DJs, caused by bad conditions.
I believe so, but it's a very long time ago. I can't even really remember what it was about.
But
I think it must have been about conditions, about food. I
think it was about the tender. So if you were part of the mutiny, how did you survive and the other 3 didn't?
Because Noel Miller had a soft spot, I rather think, because he took me under his wing quite a lot. In fact, he sponsored me when I went to Australia some years later. And so I think that was probably the reason. I don't know. So it's a bit unfair, isn't it, when you think about it? But I don't know what happened to the other 3. I think, did you say they all got fired? I wouldn't know. I can't remember. But,
yeah, Wilf Proudfoot just instantly dismissed them because they complained.
I don't know about instant, because I seem to recall all standing in a row in the managing director's home, being told not to be naughty boys, not to do it again. And that was as far as I heard about it. That's all I knew. But I was told afterwards that some had been fired and some hadn't, so I really don't know. Another one survived, actually, who unfortunately is now dead. His name is Dennis Stravey.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes.
I was just going to mention him, yeah.
Yeah, he
Dennis
survived.
the Menace.
He was one of the mutineers, if you like, but he survived.
He survived, yeah.
So I think he did because he was particularly...
good.
Good, very good.
Very good, yeah.
He was my favourite on the whole ship, to be honest.
I mean, that was the thing about 270. It's described as a sort of cash and carry radio station, done on the cheap, 40,000 I think it cost to set up. But in fact, it never wanted to be a national radio station. It was quite happy to be a regional station. And it did it very successfully. It was almost the template for what the BBC does now. Although Wilf Proudfoot said when local radio comes along, he could do it for set-up costs of £1,000, 3 staff, and it'd be ready in 2 weeks. Whereas the BBC took about 3 years to plan it, cost them $100,000 to set up, and 60,000 per year. So Wilf was probably right, but probably way ahead of his time.
Yeah.
The original plans that they were going to have a radio vicar, I think, doing a sermon periodically and a gardening spot. Truly local radio stuff.
The interesting thing about, I know how Wilf managed to, keep things economically under control. He didn't pay us much.
Were you on £25 a week?
That much? You must be joking. 20 quid a week I was on.
20? What about you, Roger?
I probably 17 guineas or something.
Still less than 20 quid.
But by the time it got to 1967, Wilf had decided that DJs were a pesky little band, and he cut the wage in half, down to 12 quid a week. And still they queued up to go on.
No, he didn't cut mine down, but one rule he did tell us once was he didn't want disc jockeys to mention their name, which was the most stupid thing you could have, because, good morning, this is the breakfast show with me, and it's just impossible in that whole world. When you're a DJ, the people like to know, what's your name, can I send you a letter, and all that sort of thing. And that was one rule which didn't actually get carried out or didn't get followed up at all. But it was an idea of his, we should remain anonymous.
Yeah, he had a great idea of incorporating a radio station together with his supermarket, so he could plug the supermarket endlessly, and he could very cleverly do what Starbucks and certain companies do now, is shuffle the money around. So the losses from 270 will be put against his Proudfoot supermarkets, one assumes. to keep the old tax down. So, Roger, an 18-year-old lad coming up north, what were your impressions of the frozen north?
As compared with Radio Essex, which was the only place I'd been beforehand, momentarily I thought, well, what an improvement this is, because there's not as much rust, and the money's slightly better, and we were more likely to actually get paid the money rather than some sort of cheque that bounces. And Wolf Proudfoot seemed to be okay, but I very soon realised that living conditions aboard 270 weren't actually commensurate with the whole idea of feeling happy, glad and gay, although happy and glad and jolly every day on air, and thinking, well, you know, that the water's supposed to be drinkable, but tasted rubbish. And I was a bit of a tea bunny at the time. Well, I still am a bit of a tea bunny. And if you love the breed of caffeine that gets into tea as different from coffee, and you can't make a decent brew for the 2 weeks we were on board, or was it 1 week? I can't remember that actually. 1 week was long enough. Then you really suffer. You wouldn't believe this, that you know, you hear of alcoholics who can't bear to be without alcohol. But actually, if you're into thine or tine, which is the caffeine in tea, and you can't get it for a week because the taste of the water and the milk is so appalling, then you start to lose the will to live. And what with not understanding the format, which was, I agree, very much my own fault, I must have been extremely stupid, or short on patience. And Wolf Proudfoot saying, well, you know, bloody DJs, you know, you don't do anything, do you? Go out, sell some time, sell some airtime. So after about 3-4 months, I'd really had enough of the living conditions, which I think is fairly well known that you have a bunk, but they were placed around the perimeter of the mess room. So if, for example, you were up early to do the breakfast show, you'd want to turn in early, obviously, but there was the mess room with the TV on and the crew drinking and making merry and this and the other. And so one thing and another all added up to making it not a very attractive proposition as compared with going off to Radio 390, which I did. And it was bye-bye 270. I don't have actually any fond memories. I mean, it wasn't dreadful. It wasn't the end of the world. Far worse things than that. But I don't have any fond memories whatsoever of Radio 270.
What an admission.
Right, bugger off.
Well, it'll be interesting in the next session when you're talking about Caroline North, when you're only there for a few days.
Yes, much better, highly enjoyable.
And actually,
would like to have stayed there, but got towed away for some reason.
I have, sorry.
I was just going to say, John's also on the Caroline North panel, and Mike, you're going to give us a little ditty at the end.
Yes, I'm going to sing my Christmas song, which is available on the website for people who type in the promotion code KNOT, K-N-O-T, KNOT, 50% discount. En voor diegenen die geen Engels begrijpen, op de website moet je KNOT intikken en dan krijg je 50% korting op mijn liedje wat ik ga zingen als wij klaar zijn. Het is een geweldig liedje. Het is geweldig.
Goedkoop.
But what I wanted to say was, because we're not talking about me, but 270, is I got lots of fond memories, but of course we can't all like the same thing. Maybe because I was ex-military, and of course anything was better than the military. Yeah, so we did have fun. Fond memories like the fishermen who used to stop on the way back and chuck us the fish which were too small for them to keep, or give us maybe a couple of lobsters. So we had, that was good stuff. And the boats that used to come out, and the tourist boats.
Yeah, the Coronia, all the young ladies waving things.
And my first water ski lessons I had. I don't know, they must have had money that a motorboat came out. And it was then I invented a new sport, which unfortunately isn't in the Olympic Games yet, underwater water skiing. And I didn't last very long, and I never tried it again. But, you know, I've got lots of fond memories.
Well, you stayed with the ship. You didn't drift off, did you?
No, I was loyal.
Yeah. So Wilf obviously did pay you a lot of money.
20 quid was probably a lot of money for a lad out the RAF, mate.
But, I mean, you weren't tempted to jump ship and join bigger ship?
No, because I was having fun, and really the thought never occurred to me that I could be a DJ somewhere else. You know, I was doing that, and I had two good slots a day when I was on the ship. And on shore I was meeting all the guys who were in the hit parade, you know, at all the pop shows and all that sort of thing. I'd love to tell you a little anecdote about Reg Presley, if I may.
Reg Presley?
Reg Presley, the same with the Trogs.
Wild thing, yeah.
And, you know, they'd stand on stage with their hipsters, the trousers cut very low, waving their crutches at the audience going, wild thing, and all the people, Reg. And I did that rather well, didn't I? Reg. And anyway, I'm in the dressing room when this erotic, top sexy singer comes in. He says, "Oh, I'm knackered. I love a nice cup of tea." And that for me put it all into perspective, you know.
Well, Joe Meek was also from the West Country, wasn't he? Joe Meek.
I can't remember quite honestly. Whose real name was Mike Hayes?
No, not.
Oh no, that's another. Someone else.
Changed it again. It wasn't Jimmy Savile either.
Now then.
Sorry, I was just thinking from what you just said about Reg Presley. Obviously, there was a lot of tea addiction in those days, wasn't there?
Yeah.
Yes, well, he must have been a teaholic as well.
Roger Scott's favourite is tea ordinaire, please. He says that every time we have a cup of tea in Canterbury together. Pete, let's have a little listen to one of your shows, fairly early show. From July 1966, cut number 3.
Oh, it's hanky-panky, the nursery, I see. Oh, with all the tiny tots. She'd say, put another nickel in. Little Anthony and the Imperials, a brand new one, number 40 sound, gonna fix you good. Oh, I see.
Was that really Pete Bowman?
Sorry, say again?
Was that really you?
I'm told it was. I don't know. I mean, it sounded like a cacophony to me. I don't know.
When
Don't be so
I don't
modest.
recognise myself at all. No.
When I interviewed Wilf Proudfoot when I was doing the book, he was talking about the various DJs, and he said that, do you know, Pete Bowman is just quite incredible. He's quiet, unassuming, self-effacing, quiet.
Really say all that?
And he said, bung a microphone in front of him, and he's somebody else, completely different.
Yeah, well, I went.
As we just heard.
When I worked in Australia, I mean, that was all knocked out because you're told, you know, it's fairly straightforward because people won't understand a word you're saying. And also, they said, this is when I worked in Australian radio. And the other thing was, you have to stop talking. You know, 15 seconds maximum. If you can't say what you've got to say in 15 seconds, we don't want you. Go. 3 records in a row, that's it. You know, you don't talk in between everyone. You don't give your name in between everyone. You don't give the time in between everyone. You just, you know, the absolute minimum of talk.
Yeah, do you remember that edict on Radio 1? It was one thought in one link, and that's your lot. And talking of Radio 1, Johnny Beerling, who was head of Radio 1, is now setting up a community radio station in Skipton.
How nice for him.
Yeah. John, you experienced some of the bad weather when you were actually on board. Quite hair-raising experience.
Well, yes, there was one crew changeover day when the tender was chugging out towards the Ocean 7, and I happened to mention to the skipper about the weather conditions we'd had a couple of days beforehand, as there had been quite strong gales blowing. And I said, on the horizon you can see the odd roller going through. And he said, well, that's right, well beyond our anchorage point, don't worry about that. Anyway, we chug along, and suddenly the skipper says, everybody hit the deck, don't look up. I suppose it goes back to school
Mike?
days.
Yeah.
Don't never really work particularly well for me. You think, I'm going to miss something. Regrettably, I did look up, and it was just water all the way around us. We were literally in a pothole in the sea. And it's the sort of thing that if that breaks over you, it would take a full-size trawler straight to the bottom. And this 38-foot flat-decked boat with a wooden box in the middle with the engine hiding in it and chugging away, it would have just turned to matchwood. It would have been absolutely sunk. Anyway, we turned round, returned to port, and in the evening we were in the pub, and eventually the Ocean 7 comes in to very near the entrance to the harbour, and we took a short boat ride out to it, and on board we chugged out, got to anchorage again, and I went to bed, and I didn't get up for 5 days. It absolutely did my head in. They say you can have a sort of end-of-life experience or whatever, all your past goings on flash through your mind, and you think, all this water, it's going to, if it comes down, we're absolutely wrecked. But if I can do one quick other story that's linked to that. When you're new on board, there was a little sort of ritual that obviously nobody tells you about, as it's meant to be a welcome on board surprise. Namely, you'd be put onto Sunday morning breakfast show, so you were on air nice and early and would therefore go to bed nice and early. At about between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning on this particular day, having gone to bed Saturday evening, about between 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, I was aware of the bunks all around the perimeter of the room had curtains, and I was aware of these curtains being violently opened. And there were about half a dozen policemen there in full uniform, and I immediately sussed that this wasn't some musical rehearsal for some charity show. They were real policemen, and eventually one of them would start giggling and then say, "Can you play these records?" I live in Maidenhead in Berkshire, and I used to drive down, coming back from club on shore leave, early hours of the morning. A policeman always used to jump out of a doorway with his flashlight. "Hi, John, play these for us, please." And it was a great relationship with the police at home, locally, and all over the place. And it was really good. But this initial problem of the policeman there, you do think, God, they must have passed a law against us and we're all going to go to prison. But not so. But the other thing that I did, and I would never do this if you're on a boat, you could be court-martialed, keel-hauled and God knows what. I'm 6'3.5" and shrinking, but in those days the bunks were only about 5 foot long, and there was a timber border either side, top and bottom. So if I went to sleep with my legs tucked up, if you naturally turned over, you instantly woke yourself up because you were a foot longer than the space you were sleeping in. So the next time I came back off shore leave, I brought a little pad saw with me, and I went, and I cut the end of the bunk out, and that's pretty serious. That's like drilling holes in the hull of the boat and letting it sink.
That explains why I used to wake up with a pair of feet on my pillow.
Just thinking about this policeman or policemen who arrived at your bunk and tore back the curtains. Did you think they were the breaking of the format police, and maybe played a record out of sequence or something like that?
Well, I do believe one or two disc jockeys did get locked up for not playing requests, maybe.
I mean, the whole thing on that particular ship, a Dutch lugger, which hadn't got a big keel.
Dutch lugger?
That's what it's called.
What's a lugger?
A lugger.
Oh, a lugger, sorry.
Sorry, that was my northern accent coming out. It rocked and rolled. It should not have been out there. Originally, the idea was to do like Veronica did, tape the programmes in the early days, as with Radio Atlanta. So Wilf Proudfoot could have the DJs up in a studio in Newcastle and never have to talk to them. And the tapes would go out and everybody would be happy. You wouldn't have to feed them or anything.
It wouldn't have been the same.
No, of course it
Would have been sterile and boring, yeah.
Well, like modern-day commercial radio station, which is
like
all
that,
voice
yeah.
tracks.
Yeah,
Yes. Very
yeah.
true. So, being in Scarborough, Roger, as an 18-year-old young lad, and Jimmy Savile probably gave you a few tips, and you came off.
Now then.
You came off your shifts and your week in Scarborough, flogging airtime, and you met at the harbour, of course, by the screaming young ladies. And you remember all that, don't you?
No, I don't remember that, Bob.
You're not. Are you trying to keep secrets from us?
I was hoping you would. I was hoping you wouldn't ask. It's all very embarrassing. The way that we were pinned to the floor in the harbour by these screaming hordes.
Screaming what?
Of young women. No, actually, sadly, the person who knows all about this isn't with us today.
Ooh, name names, quick.
Yes, I am.
And allegedly, what went on at the DJ's flat in Scarborough is nobody's business, apart from that of Guy Hamilton.
I can tell you because it was my flat.
No surprise there. No, I was so disillusioned with 270, and not disillusioned with whatever was going on in London at the time. I used to bugger off to London. I didn't stay in Scarborough to see all this activity that was apparently going on in the DJ's flat, Mike.
Well, I would like to tell you an anecdote, if I may, Mr. Chairman, about screaming
absolutely.
women.
Absolutely, we love secrets.
And I was comparing the Tremeloes concert maybe in Leeds, one of the dance halls, and I sort of done my profession, la 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 la. I got the crowd going, and the Tremeloes come out, and they're singing that, and I'm standing at the edge of the stage, and these women are screaming, Mike, Mike, Mike. And I turned around and said,
That's
hi.
nice, Miss Becker.
And they said, get out of the way, we can't see the Tremeloes. Which was a little bit of an ego, puncturer. So I went off to the bar and had a few beers. But no, in our flat, there was me and I don't know who else we shared. I think I was the most permanent person there, because Paul Burnett would go up to Newcastle. He lived up that way, and nothing much happened actually. All pretty boring, But a couple of nurses who lived next door, and when we came ashore, they'd have a cup of tea ready for us. So you would have been all right there, mate. And but no, unfortunately, no orgies. In fact, a few years ago, I went back to Scarborough and I actually found the flat, and it was in quite an isolated place above a garage, just around the corner from our local, some pub hotel around the corner. Do you remember it?
The garage block underneath the flat stored fireworks, if I remember rightly.
That's why I only had to pay 10 shillings a week to live there.
Don't throw cigarette ends out the window.
Let's have a commercial from those days. Cut number 8.
Here's a really great offer. Luxury double-bed electric blankets made of 95% wool with matching satin binding, waterproof and flame-proof elements, with a luminous on-off switch. Exclusively priced and offered to 270 listeners for £4.10. The list price for the same blankets, £8.05. And they're guaranteed for 3 years. The blankets carry the official seal of approval from the British Electrical Approvals Board, and there are eyelets for fastening to your bed. The price again, to 270 listeners only, £4.10, and the usual price for your comparison, £8.05. Send your order to Electric Blankets, Radio 270 Scarborough, and your blanket will be sent to you post-paid.
We're reliably informed that was Dennis Straney. Yeah, Dennis the Menace, selling us blankets. That's wonderful. Presumably, Wilf Proudfoot had thousands of them stored up in his garage, flogging them off. The Proudfoot advert was always a gem because he said, you get the cheapest food and everything, and Proudfoot supermarkets where the door opens automatically.
The doors open by themselves.
Oh, that was it. Yeah.
And free parking.
Yeah. But I tell you what, you hear this Proudfoot supermarket advert over and over again, as I was as probably a 13-year-old listener in Derbyshire.
Did you know Jimmy Savile, Will?
My sister did.
Now then.
But when we drove to Scarborough, you walk past, you drive past the first Proudfoot supermarket in Seamer. Do you know there was a thrill to see it? that really is this Proudfoot. The power of advertising was quite amazing. Yeah. Don Robinson set up the station. Originally, it was going to be called Radio Yorkshire in autumn of 1965, and they thought, well, with 10 kilowatts. They'd probably cover more than just Yorkshire, so it became 270. But we do have an interview, a very recent interview, that Edward Waterston from York did with Don Robinson. Let's have a little look at this.
I've enjoyed doing this with you. It's not often I do interviews, but I've enjoyed doing this with you. And can I say hello and best wishes to all the DJs, the young DJs, they're all a lot older now, but I'm still a bit older than them. To all the DJs who came into there, they turned round certain parts of British Britain with allowing commercial radio, getting commercial radio, and it's so nice to hear as some of those DJs from those days what successes have made in their lives and how well they've done. And there is quite a number of DJs and things like that on commercial radio now, and even some are just about retiring who have done marvellously in their lives. And I'm so pleased and proud that Radio 270 was the setup and start of sort of the careers of some.
Oh, that's nice, wasn't it?
I've enjoyed doing this with you. It's not often I do interviews, but I've enjoyed.
So, Don Robinson there, who originally set it up to be a middle-of-the-road station competing with the Light programme, but Wilf Proudfoot brought in a lot of finance and swiftly turned it round into a top 40 station, which was probably the right format for the North, would you say?
Sorry? Yeah, oh sure, yeah.
Rather than easy listening.
The teenagers, the listeners in the North, the same as the listeners in the South or in Scotland or in Wales, whatever, they want to hear the top hits, and of course what the pirate radio stations did was not only good for the DJs, but the most important thing, I think, apart from the historical effect it's had on radio, and I believe I mailed all the radio stations last year, emailed them. There's about 550 in the UK at the moment, which is quite a lot, maybe too many. But the important thing was all the unknown pop groups who we otherwise would never have heard of if it was all limited to BBC, all got exposure. And that was such a revolution in the popular music world, which we're still enjoying today. If it wasn't for us, and I don't mean us, 270, but if it wasn't for the pirate stations, would we have a Arrow classic rock now, if you see what I mean? So I think that is most probably the most important contribution we made to the music entertainment industry.
Yeah, and it's really nice to hear Don Robinson, who really was forced out very quickly after the station started in June. He quit in July, so within a couple of weeks. But his next project, he was trying to use the Cheetah 2 as a Radio 390 North, and it was going to be anchored off Anglesey in Wales. But he never managed to do it, which was a shame, because I think that would have worked as well, the contrast. Mike, you mentioned contemporary radio. In the UK, we are envious that you have here on medium wave Tin Gold and also Fife Nostalgia. Whereas in the UK, our government is determined to close down medium wave as soon as they possibly can. Great shame. But let's move on to contemporary British radio. If you had the chance, would any of you go back into radio today?
Yes.
Well,
if we were paid.
Oh yes, yeah.
At least I would at least £20 a week.
Do you mean back to if offshore radio existed now? Would we go back to that? Do you mean?
Well, that'd be a dream, wouldn't it? We could follow on by saying, what would offshore radio from then, if it had been allowed to continue, what would it sound like now? Would it have gone into these dreadful formatted shows?
Most probably, yeah. I mean, you get the technological evolution, which sort of follows any new trend. Technology follows it. Sometimes technology leads it and takes it, but I think you'd get that anyway, you know.
But also the music would have been different. Offshore radio was, in a way, ideally geared to the sort of pop music, the sound of pop music in the mid-60s. And I wonder what during the punk music era, if there'd been offshore radio then, well, Caroline was around, but I mean, if there'd been a sort of a chain of offshore radio stations, would it have been quite the same thing, sort of yabba dabba doo, top 40 format DJs playing, really,
That's a good point. If I could just add something to that. I think you're right. I think it would have been completely different because what we were doing was sort of the whole family could listen, mum, dad, grandparents. But you're right. If you suddenly got then everything's punk, that would have disappeared completely, yeah. Yeah,
John, what are your thoughts?
Well, I think we have to remember that we were probably governed by the record companies whose top people said, we're not at all involved, we do not supply gramophone records to these offshore stations. The chairman of EMI said that and was in national newspaper print. The only slight problem that worried me there was I used to go to Manchester Square in London where EMI's headquarters were, walk through the front door, go up to an office and meet a gentleman by the name of Jack Flory, who would give me a pile of records. And I'd look at them and I'd say, come on, Jack. This was in the days I was working for Radio Essex and we'd gone 24 hours a day, which we were the first station to do that. I said, I can't run a 24-hour-a-day station with this small handful of new music. I bring out the albums and everything else. Otherwise, I'll go out the front door, because the deal was you could walk in the front door when you got all the records, out the back door. That way, nobody sees you, and it's all tickety-boo.
It's appalling, isn't it?
But we were governed by what they gave us. It's like A Whiter Shade of Pale came out during my time between 27th of June and my leaving. Whiter Shade of Pale came out as an advance release to us, and it's an interesting thing in comparing notes over the years. Friends on boats, on other forts and things, everybody did basically the same thing. You put a new record on, pick up the pickup arm, drop it down at the beginning. If nothing's interested you in the first couple of bars, go to the middle, go to the end, and you'd have 3 piles. Good, don't know, and rubbish. Whiter Shade of Pale, most people put in the rubbish because it was totally different to what was around at the time. And then a few days later, everybody sort of thought, oh, there was that record, that there was something odd about it. Don't know. Then they think again, and we can do something with this, we'll make it a hit. Yeah. And it was. And that will govern you. We had the facility to broadcast.
And Pete, what about you? Would you go back into commercial radio?
Not at the moment, no. I have to be honest, I sound like my own father, but anything I listen to today, it leaves me absolutely cold. There's nothing around that I actually enjoy, I'm afraid. So the answer is no.
I think we all suffer from that. British radio is just so dull. Let us end our little session with our original Man of Action, together with Brendan Power, on the 1st of August 1966, which sounds untrue, really. I don't think you were there, but anyway, that's what it says, and it's certainly you.
Johnny and the Hurricanes there with Rockin' Goose, and that just happens to be, as you must have realized by now, Brendan Power's theme song, or should we say, swan song, to coin a little pun. Brendan?
Yeah, he had me all of a fluster there. I came running here, I thought I was done. I was looking at the watch down, it was a bit early, you know. Actually, I'm on at 2 o'clock. Oh, no, that's this afternoon. Catch you a bit of... can't think of anything to say, actually.
Perhaps you can tell me, Brendan, why did you pick that particular record? Just because it sounds fine?
Oh, it sounds good, yeah.
Special reason from your dim and distant past?
No, it cost me 10 bob, I'll have you know that. It cost me 10 bob for the record. I like it, that's
Mind you can still buy it, can't you?
Yeah, if you pay 10 bob for it, you can.
No, it's on an album we have right here.
Oh, yeah, it's on the album, yeah.
Memories Are Made of Hits. On the London label. Very good album. David name dropped Sinclair.
Very good album, actually, but mine's on a single.
Yeah, you have one of the originals.
Yeah, very good.
Anyhow, thanks very much, Brendan. And now the time on Radio 270 is just, no thanks, is just 18 minutes after 1 o'clock.
Thanks.
The zany world.
Anarchy.
Happy days, eh? Can I thank Hans and Rob for inviting us here? Thanks to the panel for telling us about the anecdotes. And that's the story of Radio 270.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, well, and tot ziens.
Well, you lock the doors, please. Up! Okay. Do you all understand English? Ja? Of moet ik Nederlands praten? Ja, ik doe naar Nederlands, ja. Harder moeten werken op scholen. We krijgen zo tekst. En wat ik wil, is dat jullie mij helpen met zingen, oké? Want we kunnen allemaal de refrein meezingen. Whenever I want to sing the chorus, join into the chorus. This is it, okay? So if you start the music, we'll have a quick practice, and then we'll stop and start again, okay? Thank you. And I want to hear you. Oh, the Christmas bells were jingling, and the Christmas star was bright, and the Christmas choirs were, come on, and the Christmas snow was white. All the cows and sheep was in their winter barn. I fell in love with a Snowgirl. All right, stop, thank you. Pathetic. Oh dear. And I've given you all 50% courting. 50% discount. Okay, now we're going to do it all. Oh, the Christmas bells were jingling, and the Christmas star was bright. All the Christmas choirs were singing, and the Christmas snow was white. All the cows and sheep were snug and warm in their Christmas barn. I fell in love with a Snowgirl, then she melted in my arms. I was alone one Christmas, I was lonely, I was sad. My girlfriend had just left me and gone back to her mom and dad. Here we go again. Oh, the Christmas bells were jingling, and the Christmas star was bright. All the Christmas choirs were singing, and the Christmas snow was white. All the cows and sheep were snug and warm in their Christmas barns. I fell in love with a Snowgirl when she melted in my arms. I wandered slowly through the streets, a sad and lonely boy, just looking for some Christmas love, some Christmas warmth and joy. Whoa, the Christmas bells were jingling. Hey, hey, hey. And the Christmas snow was white. All the cows and sheep and sung and warm in their Christmas barns. I fell in love with a snow girl, and she melted in my arms. It was then that I saw her standing by the Christmas tree. She looked so cool and lovely, I thought, that's the girl for me. Oh, the Christmas bells were jingling, and the Christmas star was bright. All the Christmas choirs were singing, and the Christmas snow was white. All the cows and sheep were snug and warm in their Christmas barns. I fell in love with a snow girl. I slowly crossed the square to her, to be close to her charms. I put my arms around her and she melted in my arms. Oh, the Christmas bells were jingling, and the Christmas star was bright. All the Christmas choirs were singing, and the Christmas snow was white. All the cows and sheep so snug and warm in their Christmas barn. I fell in love with a snow girl when she melted in nothing holler future. And much wiser now and happy as can be, 'cause I know I love that snow girl, and I know that she loved me. Oh, oh, the Christmas bells still jingle, and the Christmas star still bright. All the cows and sheep still snug and warm, and the snow is, I forgot the text. All the cows and sheep so snug and warm in their Christmas barns. I fell in love with a snow girl. He fell in love with a snow girl. I fell in love with a snow girl, then she melted in my arms. In my arms, in my arms, melted in my arms. Thank you. Dank u wel, dank u wel. www.ifellinlovewiththesnowgirl.com. 50% korting als je de code KNOT intikt.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So all we have to say after that is heart licked, face dark.